The banishment. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Senate fell silent as the final vote was tallied. Thousands of representatives from across the stars watched as the holographic display showed the overwhelming result: 1,247 in favor, 36 abstentions, and only 3 against. Ambassador Elena Reyes stood frozen, her face a mask of diplomatic composure, while her heart hammered in her chest. The Senate Speaker, a towering Thylaxian with iridescent scales and 6 arms, raised his ceremonial staff. By the authority vested in the Galactic Senate, humanity is hereby stripped of all voting rights and privileges. Earth and all human colonies are to be placed under quarantine. All human vessels are to return to Sol system within 30 standard cycles. Any human found beyond the quarantine zone after this period will face immediate detention. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the devastating blow. On behalf of Earth's unified government, I formally protest this decision. The evidence presented against humanity has been circumstantial at best, maliciously fabricated at worst. The speaker's compound eyes narrowed. The Senate has spoken. Ambassador, humanity's reckless experimentation with forbidden technologies cannot be tolerated. Your species has demonstrated time and again that you cannot be trusted with the power you seek. We sought only to defend ourselves, Elena countered. The Krell attacks on our outer colonies were handled according to Senate protocols, interrupted Kalor, the Taurian representative whose testimony had been particularly damning. Your species bypassed established channels and developed weapons of mass destruction in secret, weapons that could destabilize the entire quadrant. Elena looked around the chamber, searching for sympathetic faces among the alien delegates. There were few. In the 7 decades since humanity had joined the galactic community, they had made more enemies than friends. Humans moved too quickly, innovated too rapidly, and questioned too persistently for the comfort of species whose civilizations spanned millennia. This is not justice, she said finally. This is fear. This is the will of the Senate. The speaker replied, You are dismissed. Back aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel Horizon, Elena collapsed into her chair as her team gathered around her. Admiral James Chen, the military liaison, slammed his fist on the conference table. They've been planning this for years, he growled. All that talk about galactic brotherhood was just to keep us docile while they studied our weaknesses. Dr. Syed Kapoor, the science advisor, nodded grimly. The timing is suspicious, just as we're making breakthroughs in quantum field manipulation, which they claim violates the Arcturus Accords, Elena added wearily. It doesn't matter now. We have 30 days to evacuate over 200,000 citizens from outposts across 17 systems. And then what? Asked Mylin, her deputy. Return to Earth and wait for them to decide our fate. Elena stared out the viewport at the magnificent orbital structure of the Senate. Its gleaming towers and sweeping arches represented 5,000 years of interstellar cooperation. A cooperation that had just rejected humanity. No, she said softly. We find another way. The evacuation was a logistical nightmare. Colonies that had taken decades to establish were abandoned in days. Research stations, mining operations, and agricultural outposts were shuttered as ships from Earth's Space Force arrived to transport citizens home. Not everyone complied willingly. On Proxima Centauri III, a settlement of 30,000 refused to leave, forcing Admiral Chen to personally negotiate their departure. This is our home now, argued Colony Director Mbeki. We've spent 15 years terraforming this planet, and it will all be for nothing if the Senate sends enforcers, Chen replied. They've authorized lethal force against anyone who remains. In the end, most chose to leave, though rumors persisted of small groups who had disappeared into the wilderness of distant worlds, preferring to take their chances in hiding rather than return to an overcrowded Earth. As the deadline approached, President Catalina Vega addressed the United Nations from New York. Today marks a dark chapter in human history. We extended our hand in friendship to the galactic community, and they have rejected us. But humanity did not reach the stars by accepting limitations imposed by others. While we must strategically retreat for now, we will not surrender our destiny to those who fear our potential. Behind closed doors, the situation was even more dire. Earth's economy had become deeply integrated with galactic trade networks. The quarantine would trigger a depression worse than any in history. Resources that had been abundant through interstellar commerce would become scarce, and most concerning of all, Earth would be defenseless against species like the Krell, whose territorial ambitions had been barely contained by Senate peacekeepers. In a secure facility beneath the Himalayas, a council of Earth's most brilliant minds gathered to contemplate options. Dr. Emma Chandra, whose work on propulsion systems had revolutionized space travel, proposed a radical solution. "We leave," she said simply, "not just the Senate territories. We leave this part of the galaxy entirely." The room erupted in objections. It was impossible. The nearest star clusters beyond Senate space were thousands of light years away. The journey would take generations. "Not necessarily," Chandra continued, unfolding a star chart. "My team has been analyzing anomalies in the quantum field near the Cygnus Rift. We believe there may be naturally occurring wormholes, shortcuts through spacetime." The Senate explicitly forbade exploration of the rift. Admiral Chen noted, "It's why we never pushed in that direction." "Exactly," Chandra smiled thinly, "which means it's the one place they won't be watching closely." President Vega authorized the mission in secret. 5 of Earth's newest stealth vessels, equipped with Chandra's experimental drives, slipped past the quarantine perimeter and headed for the Cygnus Rift. Only one returned, the Pathfinder, commanded by Captain Maya Okafor. The data she brought back changed everything. "It's not just a wormhole," Okafor reported, her eyes bright with excitement despite her exhaustion. "It's a network of them. We charted 7 distinct passages before we had to return. And what's on the other side?" She paused, searching for words. "Unclaimed stars, dozens of systems with habitable worlds. No Senate presence, no Krell, nothing but opportunity." Project Exodus began immediately. While publicly complying with the Senate's restrictions, Earth quietly prepared for the greatest migration in human history. The plan was audacious: transfer as much of humanity as possible through the Cygnus Rift before the Senate realized what was happening. Construction began on massive generation ships designed to carry hundreds of thousands of people. Resources were diverted from consumer goods to essential technologies. A lottery system was established to determine who would go and who would stay, at least until more ships could be built. The Senate noticed the unusual activity but misinterpreted it. They believed humans were simply consolidating their presence in the Sol system, perhaps building orbital habitats to accommodate the returned colonists. By the time Xilaxian long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures near the Cygnus Rift, the first wave of ships was already departing. The journey through the wormhole was harrowing. Not all ships made it intact. The colonial vessel New Dawn emerged from the passage with severe structural damage, barely managing to limp to the nearest habitable planet before life support failed. Of its 20,000 passengers, 18,000 survived the crash landing. Lieutenant Sarah Kaminsky stood on a rocky outcropping, surveying the landscape of this new world. The sky was a deep purple, the vegetation a strange mix of blue, green, and gold. 2 moons hung on the horizon, one significantly larger than the other. "It's not Earth," said Chief Engineer Tomas Rodriguez, joining her at the lookout. "No," she agreed. "It's better. It's ours." They named the planet Defiance, a fitting first colony for humanity's new chapter. The survivors of the New Dawn faced brutal conditions. The planet's ecosystem, while capable of supporting human life, offered few immediately edible plants. Predators similar to Earth's large felines stalked the forests. Storms of incredible ferocity swept across the plains every 42 days, driven by the gravitational pull of the larger moon. But humans had always excelled in adversity. Within 6 months, They had established a functioning settlement with rudimentary agriculture and local power generation. By the time the next ships arrived, bringing much-needed supplies and additional colonists, Defiance had become a symbol of human resilience. As more vessels emerged from the wormhole network, humanity spread to other worlds in this uncharted region. Each colony faced unique challenges, but they shared knowledge and resources through a coordinated communication network. Without the restrictions imposed by the Senate, human innovation flourished. Technologies that had been deemed too dangerous or destabilizing were developed and refined. Then came the discovery that would change everything. On Defiance's smaller continent, a geological survey team led by Dr. Eiko Nakamura discovered ruins unlike anything seen before. The structures were clearly artificial and showed no resemblance to any known alien architecture. Carbon dating suggested they were at least 50,000 years old. The materials are extraordinary, Nakamura reported, handling a fragment of metallic alloy that had been recovered. The molecular structure reconfigures itself in response to electrical currents. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. Deep within the ruins, the team found intact technology, machinery that still hummed with power after millennia of abandonment. Holographic interfaces activated at human touch, displaying star charts and equations that seemed to defy conventional physics. Whoever built this, Nakamura hypothesized, they weren't just visitors. I think they were hiding, just like us. As researchers worked to decipher the alien technology, strange phenomena began to occur. Equipment malfunctioned in specific patterns. Dreams of crystalline cities and whispered warnings plagued those who spent time among the ruins. And then, 3 months after the discovery, the first contact occurred. They called themselves the Narrations, a species of bioluminescent beings composed of what appeared to be living crystal. They had been watching humanity's arrival with keen interest. "You are refugees," stated their emissary, a being who translated its name as memory of distant light. "As we once were." Through complex negotiations hampered by vastly different biologies and perception, humanity learned the truth. The Narrations had fled to this region of space long ago, escaping from a civilization that had since evolved into the Galactics, the very species that now led the Galactic Senate. "They fear what they cannot control," memory explained, "and they cannot control the power that sleeps in these ruins." The alliance that formed between humans and Narrations was one of necessity and mutual benefit. The Narrations possessed knowledge of the ancient technology, but lacked the numbers and adaptability to utilize it fully. Humans provided the ingenuity and workforce the Narrations needed. Together, they awakened the true potential of what came to be called the ancestral grid, a network of energy that connected all the ancient ruins across multiple star systems. It was a power source, a communication method, and a shield all in one. And it had been built specifically to remain hidden from the rest of the galaxy. As the first year of exile came to an end, humanity had established a foothold in their new home. The Senate, having discovered the mass exodus, sent probes through the Cygnus Rift, only to find them disabled by the ancestral grid. Their quarantine had failed, and a new human civilization was rising beyond their reach. On Defiance, Lieutenant Kaminsky, now Governor Kaminsky, watched the twin moons rise over the colony's central plaza. What had begun as a desperate escape had become something more. Not just survival, but a chance to redefine what humanity could become, free from the constraints of those who feared their potential. "They thought they were punishing us," she said to no one in particular. "They were actually setting us free." The rise. 10 years passed since the first human ships emerged from the Cygnus Rift. What had begun as desperate colonies fighting for survival had transformed into a network of thriving settlements spanning 23 worlds across 7 star systems. Humans called this new territory the Alliance of Free Worlds, though among themselves, many still used the informal name. New Humanity. On Defiance, now the capital world, the original crash site of the New Dawn had been preserved as a monument, surrounded by a gleaming metropolis that blended human architecture with Nerean crystalline aesthetics and the recovered technology of the ancestors. Spires of self-repairing alloys reached toward the purple sky, while transparent domes housed lush gardens of both earth plants and native flora. Admiral Maya Okafor, the pathfinder who had first discovered this sanctuary, stood in the Grand Assembly Chamber as representatives from all colonies gathered for the decennial conference. At 62, her hair had gone completely silver, but she stood as straight as when she'd commanded the Pathfinder through the rift. "We've accomplished what many thought impossible," she addressed the assembly. "We've not only survived, we've prospered. Our population has grown to 12 million across all settlements. Our understanding of the ancestral technology increases daily. But we cannot forget that we are not alone in this galaxy." The holographic display in the center of the chamber activated, showing the latest intelligence gathered by stealth drones sent back through the wormhole network. The Senate had not abandoned its interest in human activities. Patrol vessels regularly swept the perimeter of the Cygnus Rift, and according to informants still on Earth, the quarantine had only tightened. "They're afraid," said Representative Jackson from the agricultural colony of New Eden. "They should be. With the ancestral grid, we could challenge their authority directly." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, but Okafor raised her hand for silence. "That would be a grave mistake," she cautioned. "The Senate controls thousands of worlds and species. Their combined military might is still beyond our capacity to resist in open conflict." "Then what do you propose?" asked Councillor Dias from the mining colony at Vulcan's Forge. "Hide forever. We've spent a decade building our strength while our homeworld remains under their boot." The question hung in the air, dividing the assembly between those who favored continued isolation and those who longed for vindication against the civilization that had rejected them. The debate might have continued indefinitely, if not for the arrival of Memory of Distant Light, the Nerean emissary who had become humanity's closest ally. The crystalline being glided into the chamber, pulsing with urgent colors that those familiar with Nerean communication recognized as alarm. "Honored friends," Memory's translated voice resonated through the chamber. "Our deep space sensors have detected multiple vessels entering the outer reaches of the Alliance. They do not match any known configuration in our database." The assembly erupted in confusion. The ancestral grid should have hidden their presence from detection. No Senate vessels had ever penetrated this far. Dr. Emma Chandra, now director of the Alliance Science Directorate, activated her console. "Show us," she commanded. The holographic display shifted to reveal strange ships moving through the void. They resembled enormous insects, with segmented hulls and appendage-like protrusions that seemed to flex and pulse with energy. There were dozens of them, following a formation that suggested intelligence and purpose. Not Senate design, Okafor noted immediately. Nothing like the Krell either. Memory's crystalline form flickered with patterns of deep concern. They are unknown to the Nerean collective memory, but they are navigating directly toward the Helios colony. Helios, the newest human settlement, was still vulnerable, its defenses not yet fully operational. Within hours, emergency evacuation protocols were initiated, and the Alliance Defense Fleet, a collection of retrofitted generation ships and newly constructed vessels incorporating ancestral technology, moved to intercept. First contact with the unknown species occurred in orbit around Helios. The aliens made no response to communication attempts in any known language. When Alliance vessels established a defensive perimeter, the insectoid ships simply accelerated, showing no concern for potential collision. "They're not slowing down," reported Captain Layla Hassan of the defense cruiser Intrepid. "Intent seems hostile. Permission to engage." Admiral Okafor, monitoring from Defiance Command, hesitated only briefly. "Granted. Defensive measures only." The battle that followed revealed the true nature of their new enemy. The alien vessels absorbed conventional weapons fire without apparent damage. When struck by energy weapons, their hulls seemed to adapt, becoming resistant to subsequent attacks of the same type. Most disturbing of all, When an Alliance ship was captured by grappling appendages, the alien vessel began to physically integrate with it, consuming its materials like a predator devouring prey. They're not just attacking, Chandra observed with horror. They're feeding. The Alliance fleet retreated, losing 7 ships in the process. The aliens, soon named the Swarm for their behavior and appearance, descended upon Helios. Fortunately, most colonists had been evacuated, but surveillance drones captured footage of the Swarm methodically dismantling structures, vehicles, and machinery, absorbing materials into their ship bodies. In the emergency council that followed, realization dawned that humanity faced an existential threat unlike any they had encountered before. The Swarm showed no interest in communication, territory, or conquest, only consumption and growth. More disturbing still, analysis of their movement patterns suggested they had come from beyond Senate space. The Senate doesn't know about them, Okafor concluded. If the Swarm bypassed their territories to reach us, then we're just the first meal, Chandra finished grimly. And once they're done with us, they'll head straight for Senate space, including Earth. For 2 tense months, the Alliance fought a defensive war against the Swarm. Conventional tactics proved ineffective as the aliens adapted to each weapon and strategy. Helios was lost entirely, converted into what appeared to be a breeding ground for new Swarm vessels. 3 more colony worlds faced imminent threat. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of Nerian elders, working with human scientists, discovered that the ancestral grid was more than just a power network. It was a weapon system designed specifically to combat threats like the Swarm. The ancestors faced them before, Memory explained, displaying ancient records recovered from deep within the ruins. The Swarm appears every 50,000 years, emerging from dormancy in the void between galaxies. The ancestors fought them to a standstill, then created the grid to shield this region before they departed. Departed where? Asked Counselor Dias. Memory's colors shifted to a pattern never seen before, a mix of reverence and mystery. The records say only that they ascended beyond the material plane. What matters is that they left their defense system for those who would come after. Activating the grid as a weapon required synchronizing all known ancestral sites across the Alliance worlds. The energy requirements were enormous, requiring every colony to divert power to the ancient structures. It was a desperate gamble, leaving settlements vulnerable if the plan failed. As the Swarm fleet approached the Defiance system, everything was ready. Admiral Okafor stood in the central control chamber beneath the largest ancestral structure, surrounded by the finest minds of both human and Nerian society. Whatever happens, she told them, remember that we stand here together. 2 species united against extinction. That alone makes us worthy of survival. Dr. Chandra initiated the sequence. Across 20 worlds, ancestral technology hummed to life, pulsing with energy that had lain dormant for millennia. On Defiance, the ground itself seemed to vibrate as power coursed through long-buried conduits. In space, the grid manifested as a web of golden energy, enveloping the approaching Swarm vessels. Where the energy touched the alien ships, their adaptive hulls failed to resist. The Swarm, for the first time, showed signs of distress, attempting to retreat from the golden web. But the grid followed them, expanding outward in a wave that engulfed ship after ship. The Swarm vessels didn't explode or disintegrate. They simply stopped, frozen in space, as if time itself had ceased to flow around them. It's working, Chandra whispered, watching the sensor data with wide eyes. The grid is placing them in some kind of stasis field. For 3 days, the grid maintained its energy output, capturing every detected Swarm vessel in the Alliance territory. When the last ship was neutralized, the ancient technology powered down automatically, leaving the alien fleet suspended in orbit around various worlds, neutralized but preserved, like insects in amber. The victory was monumental but raised profound questions. The Swarm would eventually return in greater numbers. The grid had stopped them this time, but its activation had revealed the Alliance's presence to the wider galaxy. Long-range scans confirmed what they feared. Senate vessels were already moving toward the Cygnus Rift, clearly aware that something significant had occurred. In the Grand Assembly, the debate raged over how to proceed. Some advocated for using the grid to seal off the wormholes, isolating themselves completely. Others argued for a preemptive strike against Senate forces, using their newfound power to carve out a larger territory. Admiral Okafor proposed a third option. "We send a message," she said simply, "to the Senate, to Earth, to everyone. We show them what we faced and how we stopped it. We offer an alliance against the true enemy that threatens all sentient life." The message that crossed the vast distances between stars carried evidence of the swarm threat and a proposal from the Alliance of Free Worlds. Humanity, once exiled, now offered salvation. The Senate's response was predictably divided. Many species viewed the message as human propaganda, a trick to regain access to Senate space. Others, particularly those with longer historical memories, recognized descriptions of the swarm from ancient legends. The deadlock broke when Silaxian historians uncovered records that aligned with the Nerian account. Their ancestors had indeed encountered a consuming force that nearly destroyed their civilization before they evolved into their current form. What they had forgotten, the Nerians had remembered. 3 years after the swarm encounter, a Senate delegation arrived at the edge of Alliance space. Their flagship carried representatives from 12 major species, including humans from Earth. For the first time since the exile, official contact was established between the separated branches of humanity. The meeting took place on Defiance, in a transparent dome overlooking the now thriving capital city. Ambassador Elena Reyes, who had stood before the Senate during humanity's vanishment 15 years earlier, now faced them as a representative of a power they could no longer dismiss. "When you cast us out," she told them, "you believed you were containing a threat. Instead, you created a force that now stands between you and annihilation. The swarm is dormant for now, but will return stronger. The ancestral grid can protect us all, but only if we work together." The negotiations were lengthy and complex. Trust did not come easily after years of separation and resentment, but the evidence was irrefutable. The swarm posed a greater threat than any internal galactic politics. In the end, a new compact was formed. The alliance would remain autonomous, but open exchange of knowledge, trade, and mutual defense would be established with the Senate. Earth's quarantine would be lifted, allowing reunification of human families separated by exile. Most significantly, the Senate formally acknowledged its error in banishing humanity, recognizing that the very traits they had feared, adaptability, innovation, and determination, had proven essential to confronting the swarm. On the final day of negotiations, as the treaties were being prepared for signature, Admiral Okafor took a moment alone with Ambassador Reyes on a balcony overlooking the city. "Was it worth it?" Reyes asked quietly. "All the suffering, the separation, the deaths during colonization." Okafor considered the question, watching the people below, humans and Nerians moving together through streets that would have been unimaginable 15 years ago. "I can't answer that," she said finally. "But I know this. They tried to write an ending to our story, and instead, we wrote a new beginning. Not just for humanity, but for all the species who will face the challenges ahead." Below them, the city of Defiance gleamed in the light of the setting sun, its towers a testament to what could be built from the ashes of banishment. Around the planet, the ancestral grid hummed quietly, protecting not just the exiles who had awakened it, but all those who had come together under its shield. Former enemies now united against the darkness between the stars. As night fell on Defiance, the twin moons rose over a civilization that had been forged in adversity and tempered by resolve. Humanity had not just survived exile. They had transcended it, becoming something greater than they ever could have been if they had remained bound by the limitations others sought to impose. They had been banished to die. Instead, they had built an empire, and in doing so, perhaps saved the very galaxy that had rejected them.